Welcome to Cloud on Air, live webinars from Google Cloud. We are hosting webinars daily. You are watching Into the Cloud, a programmatic approach to go deeper into strategic themes for the cloud business. My name is Siddharth Bhai, Engineering Product Manager. Today, we will be talking about getting started with managed service for Microsoft Active Directory. You can ask questions anytime on the platform, and we have Googlers on standby to answer them. Let's get started. So today, I'll be talking you through our managed service for Microsoft Active Directory, which is in beta. I've been working with Google Cloud for over 2 years. I've been with Google for a good amount of time, happy and excited to be here. And my work focuses on our managed security services. So I'm the product manager for some of our security offerings, where we go ahead and look to take the load off of you in terms of running critical infrastructure securely and in a highly available fashion. To talk about our subject today, I wanted to jump in and talk to you about Microsoft Active Directory management challenges. Now, as I work with our many cloud customers, one of the common themes that I find is this. There are folks who have been working with Active Directory a long time, some of them for 10, 15 years or more, which is a lot of deep Active Directory expertise. However, a lot of the times, these personnel are not have not been exposed to running infrastructures on cloud so much. On the other hand, you have folks who are very deep and skilled when it comes to running infrastructure on cloud, but the type of applications they have an expertise in tends to be different. Tends to be one that perhaps is focused more on Kubernetes, serverless architectures, and so on. Now, running Active Directory is something that does require a lot of skill and expertise. And so how is it that you go ahead and find the right type of people who have expertise in both running Active Directory as well as cloud? This tends to be a challenge that I've seen in the industry. For this session today, I think the folks who will find it most beneficial are the ones who are working in an IT operations capacity, an IT operations leader, an architect, or some of these other disciplines in the organizations. Now, the question that comes to mind is, if it is a problem to run Active Directory in the cloud, what are the type of use cases that require it? And so the need for this comes from if you have a server that is domain joined to Active Directory, if your application uses Kerberos, LDAP, or Windows integrated authentication, or you might have an app that is reaching out to Active Directory to retrieve the group's information to make its local authorization decisions. You might have had an app that's written to .NET, System.Directory Services, or one of the other AD client-side APIs or libraries. And one of the interesting architecture choices is if you want to run your cloud deployment independently and highly available in the cloud with low latency so that your VM-specific operations for your infrastructure that is running in the cloud is getting service completely from the cloud itself. To go ahead and help solve these two challenges where you do have a need for Active Directory in the cloud, but a difficulty in finding the right type of people, and even when you have the right skill sets on your team, you have a lot of things that they need to take care of in addition to their existing responsibilities. We've gone ahead and introduced this managed service for Microsoft Active Directory. It's a highly available hardened Google Cloud service that's running actual Microsoft AD on Windows Server, which enables you to go ahead and do some very important things when it comes to running your AD-dependent infrastructure on Google Cloud. It's something that you can use to manage authentication and directory operations for your cloud-dependent, for your AD-dependent apps that you're running in the cloud. The service automates AD server maintenance and security configuration for you. You can connect your existing on-premises Active Directory domains to the cloud-managed Active Directory domain. And I'll have more to say about this in a couple of minutes. The other interesting thing which is worth highlighting is this managed Active Directory domain can have a presence in multiple regions. So you can come to us and say, deploy the domain controllers for this managed AD domain in a specific region, and you can come back at a later point of time and ask us to deploy additional domain controllers from the same domain in other regions. Now, what's happening behind the scenes, is you have your managed Active Directory domain, which is running isolated from the Active Directory domains of other customers. So it runs in its own isolated project on its own isolated network. We have baked in the best practices and principles of Active Directory design when it comes to delegation. And so we have a delegated admin account for you to go ahead and utilize to manage this AD domain. It is also able to connect with your existing Active Directory domains over one-way or two-way trusts and with one or multiple Active Directory forests. When it comes to what is it that the service is doing on an ongoing basis, there is a bunch of specific best practices and operations you need to take care of and do manually, which the service automates for you and does elegantly, as I'll show in the next few minutes. One of the things is, anytime you ask us to deploy a managed Active Directory domain, we are deploying it in at least 2 zones. So it's highly available in every region, when you ask us to deploy it there. We're running diagnostics on the Active Directory domain every few minutes to check on the domain's health, and if there's any deviations from what we'd expect, it appropriately gets messaged and processed. We're backing up your Active Directory domain, your managed Active Directory domain, every single day. And so in the case of an outage, if there was a disaster recovery type situation, we can bring the domain back up for you without you having to worry about scheduling backups or doing things manually. We're addressing the Active Directory skills issues that we spoke about by having this service be built and managed by engineers who are skilled in both Active Directory and in Google Cloud. And security is something that's baked in pretty core to the service, where the managed AD domain is available by default on no networks other than the ones you authorize. And I'll show how we do this in a demo. So the interesting takeaway of the last point is, if in the same project you were running a variety of other types of infrastructure that had nothing to do with Active Directory on different VPC networks or private cloud networks, then those other pieces of infrastructure do not end up accessing the AD domain unless you explicitly authorize that specific network. One of the other challenges that I hear about from customers is, on day one, when you try to deploy something like Active Directory, which has very specific firewall rules and recommendations around it, the firewall rules are set right. But a month or two later, somebody else comes in their organizations and changes those firewall rules because they were trying to deploy some other piece of infrastructure. And these firewall rules are now no longer in line with what they had wanted to or had set up on day one. Because the managed AD domain runs in a separate project on an isolated network, any changes you make to the firewall rules in your projects do not have a bearing or are not able to change the firewall rules for the managed AD domains network itself. The other thing is, if you've been working with Microsoft Active Directory for a while, you know that there are these security patches that come out typically monthly, and there is a certain way they should be applied to the Active Directory domain. So we go ahead and take care of that for you, regularly patching up your servers while making sure your domain remains available through the update and the patch operation. We integrate service level operations with cloud audit logging, so you have the right level of visibility into service related important operations that are happening on your managed AD domain. And the last couple of points focus on an important theme again, which is security. So one of the things is, any Active Directory related credentials for your managed AD domain are periodically rotated by the service, the ones that the service is managing for you. And there is a key that is unique to each managed Active Directory domain that is stored in Cloud KMS, and there is a certain interesting mechanism that is set up in place so that those credentials are getting rotated at a regular cadence. The last bit is, most of the time, our service level code is managing your Active Directory domain for you. In case there is an event which requires somebody else to go in and intervene manually, as you would expect, we have a good and strong scheme in place. The person needs to be registered and be in one of certain authorized groups. They need to be registered as being on call for that duration, and they're able to get the elevated access to your Active Directory domain only for a limited period of time. So it's verified and time-bound. Now, these are the various best practices that the service goes ahead and automates for you, and several more which I won't have time to cover today, but we are talking about it more in our documentation. Now that you've gotten a sense of what the service is and what type of things is it making possible for you, the theme of our session today is getting started with this managed AD service. So in the next few minutes, I'll show you how you can get up and going with this managed AD service on your own. To do that, I am now switched to our Google Cloud Console UI, and I have preloaded for us today a specific page that shows you how to go ahead and get up and going with your own managed AD domain. Now, to cover a couple of prerequisites quickly. You want to make sure that you're in the right project, because the project that you initiate the creation from is the one that is utilized to associate the AD domain with. So as long as you're in the right project, then you go ahead and check on another thing, which is, was billing enabled in this project? Now the service is free to try while it is in beta, which is its current state. However, any Active Directory dependent infrastructure you run in your own project manually is something that will be charged based on your usual rates. So billing needs to be enabled on the project. The last bit is, before you start filling out forms on this field, you want to make sure that you have enabled the APIs. That is the API for the service. And those of you who have been working with Active Directory for a while probably know that it deeply integrates with DNS. And so we also want the DNS API to be enabled before you go through the creation. So as we start doing that, you can now go ahead and start filling in information specific to this AD domain. Now this is asking for a fully qualified domain name. So if I try to exit out now, it will complain that it is not a proper FQDN. And so to go ahead and fix that, we of course will type in a fully qualified domain name which Active Directory expects. The UI is reminding us that this is something which cannot be changed later. Again, it's one of those things with Active Directory where trying to change a domain name after it's been created is tricky. So I encourage you to think about the domain name upfront. If you're just using this for testing, then you're welcome to proceed with something that's convenient. But if this is going to be a long-lasting production domain for you, then you do want to make sure you're thinking about these things upfront. The next thing is, as you go further through the page, as I had mentioned, the domain is only available on networks you authorize. So in this project, I have 3 networks that are available. And when I go ahead, I can select all of them, or I can select just one of them. And what this will do behind the scenes is it'll go ahead and set up a VPC peering between this network, which is in my project, or which would be in your quote-unquote consumer or customer project. And then it is setting up a peering from this network to the other network, which you don't see, but that's the one that is running your managed Active Directory domain behind the scenes. And you can always come back to this UI at a later point of time and update this list. The next one is the CIDR range. Now what is this? What this is saying is, when we go ahead and deploy the Active Directory domains for you, what are the IP addresses we should be using for the domain controllers themselves? So as I try to exit now, you will notice that the UI warns me that I haven't set the appropriate IP CIDR range. Now what type of a CIDR range should you be choosing? This should be a /24 subnet, and so anytime we are bringing up domain controllers for you, we will bring it up only within this IP range. So a domain controller might get an IP of 10.0.5.3, let's say, but it will be things that are within the subnet range that you specified. So that it does not result in any type of an IP collision with other infrastructure that you may be running on your own, you want to make sure that the IP range that you specify here obviously does not conflict with an IP range in the network where you want this domain to be used. Now, as a best practice, you probably want to think about, as time goes by, which are the other networks where you'll want to use this Active Directory domain, and pick a CIDR range upfront that does not conflict with any other IP ranges that are in use on those other networks. If you're thinking about connecting up this Google Cloud network with your on-premises network or one in other data centers, then you probably want to pick an IP range which is not utilized on any of those networks. So by going ahead and putting in a little bit of thought upfront for your production domains, again, for test domains, feel free to just pick one that doesn't conflict with this. But if you intend to use this domain long-term, you ideally want to pick a range which is not in use anywhere in your infrastructure. Now, if you're a large organization and you have a team that does this for you, which is manage your private IP space, it's probably a good time to go and have a word with them and get yourself an appropriate IP CIDR range assigned, which you will then give to the managed AD service, and we will only bring up domain controllers with IPs in this range. The other thing is, you can let us know where do you want us to bring up the domain controller. So in this case, I'm asking for the domain controllers to come up in US West 1. And the other thing you'll notice at the bottom is there is an ability for you to specify an admin name for your specific Active Directory domain. And so what this is doing is, this is a delegated admin account that we are creating for you. And by default, we'll just pick the name setup admin. So let's say you go ahead and fill all of these things out and you hit create. And as you come back from your lunch break, you'll probably find that we have had the managed Active Directory domain be created for you. So I'm switching now to a different UI, which is showing you the results of this create operation if you came back to this UI after a little bit of time, let's say typically the order of an hour or so. And so now you'll see that your domain is up and ready, it's available. It has the name corporate.example.com. The domain controllers are deployed in US West 1, that they're up and running, they're healthy. You'll notice that the network that we specified, testbed network, is the one that is registered as an authorized network for this managed Active Directory domain. And there's a few more details about the AD domain. Setup admin would be the name of the account that you would use in order to access this AD domain. So at this point, your domain controllers have been deployed, they're up and running. And now how is it that you can go ahead and start utilizing this specific domain? Now to do that, setup admin is a delegated admin account that has been created for you. In order to access and work with the data in this AD domain, the nice thing is you can utilize any of your existing Active Directory tools that you're interested in using with this managed AD domain. So to show that, I will now switch to a different UI. And this is a VM called D-1, which I have up and running on Google Cloud. So this is a VM that I have created. It's not a part of the managed AD service. Some of you might be familiar with the term Jumpbox VM or a connector VM. That's what we're utilizing this for. Now, as I look at the network and zoom in on this, so you can see, you'll notice it is running on the same testbed network. So because we asked for the managed AD domain to be authorized and available on this network, this VM can now access the managed AD domain. So in order to connect up with the domain and do operations that pertain to Active Directory data, what you would do is you would go ahead and first hit a set Windows password on this VM. And this, if I was to hit set now, would go ahead and create a local account on that VM, which I can use to log into the VM. And once I've logged onto the VM, I can utilize the setup admin password to go ahead and domain join that VM or use it for other Active Directory operations. To show that, we'll come back to our AD domain, Active Directory domain details page, and you notice there is a set password button here. So if I was to click that, I would then get the password for the Active Directory account, which has the name setup admin, which I can then use to connect up to the Active Directory domain. Now, one of the things that I had mentioned is that you are able to connect this managed Active Directory domain with your existing domains. So on the same page down below, you will notice I have pre-created a trust with onprem.example.com. So this might be your existing Active Directory on-premises domains. You can see that the trust direction here is one way. And as a result of this, now you can have users from your onprem.example.com domain, which is an Active Directory domain that you managed, and you can authenticate with those users to the Google Cloud managed Active Directory domain and to infrastructure that's running on Google Cloud that is domain joined to this managed Active Directory domain. One of the other aspects, which is of course top of mind when it comes to Active Directory and security, is logging. So now I'm switching to this other UI, which is showing you our integration with Cloud Audit Logging. So if you wanted to, for example, come back and check, wait, that set password operation sounds pretty sensitive, and I want to know if somebody's come in through the UI and has set that, then you can go ahead and set up a simple filter which will just exclude all of the other events. And you can see here, for instance, earlier this morning, as I was preparing for our webinar today, I went in and hit set password on one of my managed Active Directory domains. And so you can see that the reset admin password operation is something that has been caught by Cloud Audit Logging and is being showed and surfaced in this page. So this way, not just this operation, but the other Active Directory operations are integrated with the Cloud Audit Logging framework. Now, that was a lot to take in, and while I'm glad you're paying attention now, you don't have to remember all the details from the webinar directly. We have included documentation that takes you through the steps of creating a domain. So we have a quick start guide, which will go over those same prerequisites for you and talk to you about getting up and going with your managed AD domain. Setting up trust is something that if you do choose to utilize that is an optional part of the service, by the way. You can have a fully cloud managed and fully hosted in cloud managed Active Directory domain, or you could connect up with your existing AD domains. And so if you choose to do that, there are some trust related configuration things that you need to do in your other on-premises AD domain. So that is something that this guide talks to you about. And audit logging is always something that's top of mind from a security standpoint. And so this guide explains to you what are all the different types of admin operations. We just looked at this one in the demo, but there's quite a few more that are provided as a part of the service. So that's how you can go ahead and get up and started. And so by this point of time, you have your managed AD domain that is up. It's serving for you. And now we come to the interesting part of how is it that you can utilize this managed AD domain to solve business problems and technical problems that are important for your organization. And so to show that, in the next segment of our webinar, I'll show you how we can, with some additional demos and slides and guidance, how you can use the managed AD domain to solve key problems for you. Now, one of the very important things when you're running your infrastructure on public clouds is making sure only the right type of people, only the right and authorized folks can access those VMs. And so one of the interesting things that comes into play on Windows is RDP access. Because if somebody is able to RDP, they essentially are interactively logged in to your VMs and can do a wide set of operations. And I've heard from multiple customers a desire to have more control to lock this down. Now, the way that you can do that with the managed AD service is something that we have put some thought into. So as you bring up your VMs on Google Cloud and domain join them to the Google Cloud Managed Active Directory domain, you will notice that by default, they start showing up in an organizational unit we have created, although you're welcome to create more OUs of your own choice. Now, as these VMs are coming up all in this one OU, we have pre-created a group policy object that applies to that organizational unit. And the GPO is set up such that only the users which are a member of a specific type of group are the ones who can go in and access are the ones who can remote desktop into your infrastructure that's domain joined to this managed AD domain. To dig deeper into that, I'm now switching to a demo. So to just make sure I ground us first, we are now looking at a VM that is D-1. If you might remember, the VM that I'd shown in the Google Cloud Console UI a few minutes ago, this is that same VM. And this is joined in to corporate.example.com. So we're looking at a VM in Google Cloud. The next thing that you will notice is the user account that I'm logged in with is an on-premises user. So you might remember I'd shown a trust with the onprem.example.com domain. And so this is a user account that is not being managed in Google Cloud, but is being managed in the on-premises Active Directory domain. And so as a result of that, as a result of having set up the trust appropriately and having put in place the right type of authorization permissions, this user can authenticate to the VM that is running on Google Cloud. And the interesting thing is, as I go ahead and now look at the data that is housed inside of this managed AD domain, you see that there is a group that we have pre-created for you here. It is called the Cloud Service Computer Remote Desktop Users Group. And the interesting thing is, as you add and remove users from this group, they will thereby get or lose the ability to be able to have RDP access to your VMs that are running on Google Cloud. To make infrastructure convenient for you, in fact, we have invested and put in place a few other pre-created groups. For instance, for anyone who you wish to be administering your service, there is this Cloud Service All Administrators group. Now, whoever is a member of this group, and these could be users that are created in the same managed Active Directory domain, and these can also include users from your trusted AD domains. So these users will be the ones who will be able to manage this Active Directory service. There is another group that is domain join accounts. So whoever is a member of this group will be able to domain join their VMs to this managed AD domain. And there's a few other groups like this that we have created for your convenience. As I come back to the slides and talk to you about other use cases, one that a lot of you focus on, of course, is easy domain join. So you already saw an example of this in the previous demo, so I'll just touch upon it lightly and let you know that the way we have integrated with Cloud DNS makes it possible for the VM to just come up on that authorized network and be able to find the managed AD domain without requiring any additional client-side DNS configuration. The other thing that a lot of you work with when it comes to Active Directory is group policy. And so group policy, as I mentioned, we have pre-created an organizational unit for you, and that automatically applies to the OU where all of your VMs are housed. You also have an ability to create additional group policy objects and have them be applied to child OUs or sub-OUs of this organizational unit. So you're able to have quite a bit of flexibility when it comes to group policy and working with Google Cloud Managed Active Directory. The other thing that I want to talk to you about is managed instance groups. A managed instance group is a pretty interesting construct in Google Cloud, which allows you to go ahead and look at a specific VM, not individually, but as a collection and a part of the group. I'll talk you through this specific managed instance group use case and how that is enabled with the managed service in a minute with a demo. So I'll switch my UIs, and now we are once again back in for this demo into the Google Cloud Console UI. You will notice that I'm looking at a managed instance group, and this managed instance group is something that has, as you can see, 3 VMs that are part of this group. So it allows you to manage these 3 VMs directly by managing the managed instance group. Let me show you a quick part of the demo, and then I'll talk more about what managed instance groups are and how they integrate with the service. So these 3 specific VMs that are part of this managed instance group, if I switch my view and now look at the Active Directory data view, you will notice that there are 3 computer objects that correspond to those 3 VMs, right? And so these are the 3 VMs. Now, one of the interesting things that you can do with managed instance group is you can come to the UI and you can ask for the managed instance group infrastructure to create additional VMs of the same type for you. So I'm going to try go from 3 VMs to 10 instances that are part of this managed instance group. And so what's happening here, and what are managed instance groups all about? So as you notice, there is a template section here. So what this is doing is it is essentially asking the managed instance group to create 7 additional VMs, 7 additional instances that are all going to come up as a part of the specifications listed in this template. And so this is interesting because if you often have workloads that are of a similar type, then you're able to go ahead and manage them as one group. Now, what's a good use case? For instance, if you have a bunch of website front-end servers, IIS servers tend to still be somewhat popular in a large chunk of organizations. And if all the servers are effectively the same for you, and you just want to be able to create more of them quickly, then you can utilize managed instance groups to go ahead and scale them up from 3 to 10. And now the very interesting thing that is happening with respect to Active Directory here is as you go ahead and bring up 7 or ask managed instance groups to bring up 7 additional VMs for you, in Active Directory, they're all coming up and automatically getting domain joined. So to check on that, I'll go ahead and switch my view back to this UI, and let's go ahead and hit refresh. And so the computer accounts are still coming up because what's happened is the VMs have come up, and after they have come up, they have gone ahead and indicated and are pre-configured with a script that is essentially going to reach out to Active Directory and create computer accounts for those VMs and thereby domain join them to the same managed Active Directory domain. And because it is something that happens as a part of sysprep, it takes a minute or 2 for it to kick in. So we'll go ahead and check on it and see if it's come up by this point of time. So as this comes up, and we'll wait on that for an additional 30 seconds or so, one of the things to think about is, well, if you're looking to build your infrastructure and start to run it on Google Cloud, what are the other advantages that the platform offers for you? And so one of the things is our Google Cloud VPCs are multi-regional. So you can have subnets from different regions be a part of the same VPC network. And so from the moment when you have asked for a managed Active Directory domain to be available on an authorized network, that same managed AD domains with domain controllers deployed in one of the regions can go ahead and service your infrastructure, which may be running in multiple regions. The other thing that you can do is you can then come back to the same AD domain and ask for it to deploy additional domain controllers in other regions which you may be now starting to use more frequently. So this is how you have a lot of flexibility when it comes to designing your infrastructure on Google Cloud. And so as I come back to the demo and hit refresh, one of the things you'll notice is as I went ahead and did that, you had all of these additional computer accounts show up in Active Directory. And you'll remember there were just 3 instances before. Now we have 10, similar to the list of 10 that we saw. So it's pretty interesting to see that you were able to so quickly come up and deploy additional VMs and have them be domain joined to Active Directory by utilizing the managed service for Microsoft AD. And so with that, let's come back to our slides and recap on what is it that we have been soaking in for the last few minutes. What I'd recommend is you want to think about the right type of IP side or range when you're deploying your domain controllers. One of the other things is a lot of you use shared VPCs. So if you want to utilize the managed AD domain with a shared VPC, please please ask us to create a managed AD domain for you from the host project of the shared VPC. I showed you several pre-created Active Directory groups, so please feel free to utilize them for easy administration. You can come back and add and remove regions, add and remove authorized VPCs, and come back and add and remove or attach or detach trust relationships after you've created the managed AD domain. So there is a point in time when you create it, and then more operations you can do over the lifetime of the Active Directory domain. And of course, you can look more closely at our integration with Cloud Audit Logging for the service level operations. So managed service for Microsoft Active Directory is something that helps you solve your concrete GCP use cases, supports production apps on both Windows and Linux. It augments a lot of your infrastructure modernization efforts and helps you reduce overhead and helps enhances cloud security. Thank you for tuning in. Please visit Cloud OnAir for more content from our Google Cloud experts.